What's up, guys? Eric Coates here on another walk, and hopefully it's not too windy. It's a nice day, it's just a little windy, so hopefully the audio is not too thrown off. I gotta get myself a better microphone. But today it's actually my birthday, and you know, I'm not a big birthday guy, and I know that probably seems weird that I'm announcing it's my birthday on YouTube, but the reason I tell you this is because on my birthday I usually reflect about my life, where I am, where I've been, where I plan to go. And I thought this year, looking back, it's about, 3 years now? So I just turned 37. And that means that marks 3 years of me coding. Maybe, you know, just a little bit less than that. But when I wrote my first line of code, I was 34 years old. And I know out there right now, especially, there's a lot of people that are like poo-pooing, I guess the best way to say it is poo-pooing on if you should learn how to code, if it's still worth doing with AI, you know, getting better and better. You know, should you learn how to code? And then there's another layer to that where people feel like they're too old to make a change. They're too old to learn how to code. They're too old to learn this skill. And I challenge them to realize that, hey, I am here and I'm living proof that you can be doing one completely different thing and teach yourself, because that's how I did. Teach yourself how to code and land a job. So I think I'll get into kind of how I came to being a programmer, and why I think you should too. If this video finds you and you're out there and you're like, oh, I don't know if it's worth doing, you know, what's it gonna be like? That's what I'm thinking I'm gonna talk about today on my walk. So I might have mentioned this in other videos. I also have a podcast where I tell kind of an in-depth story, but kind of wrap it all up. I right now am a mid-level developer. I'm a web developer. I use PHP mostly and JavaScript. I'm very fluent in both those languages, and I know some Ruby on Rails as well, and you know, several frameworks, React, kind of, you know, a lot of different stuff. Do a lot with SQL database as well. And I've learned all that within 3 years' time. Gone from no code, never wrote a single line of code, to a mid-level developer. How did I do that? Okay, wasn't easy, but this is kind of to motivate anybody out there that's thinking that they can't do it, or they think they want to do it and they want to know what it's like. So to make the long story short, I did not go to school for computer science. I was always kind of good with technology, but I never thought, you know, in high school, in college, into my 20s, never was it on my radar that I was going to be a programmer. And I found my way there kind of organically. So I worked at a resort, and at that resort, I was a corporate social director, which meant when big companies came to the resort, I planned their stay. I planned their activities. I made special activities for them. And in doing that stuff, one thing that like commonly would happen is you'd have a planner for the group, and they'd be like, you know, we really want to do a specialized Jeopardy game, or, you know, we really want to do a specialized game where we learn about each other, and or whatever it might be. So in doing that and trying to always make the guests happy, I would make games. And I started, believe it or not, with Microsoft PowerPoint. I got pretty good at it. Like I made a full working version of Wheel of Fortune in PowerPoint. Like literally it had like you know, all the letters of the alphabet had 13 and 32 rows of letters. And when you clicked on the letter, it crossed the letter out, and in the puzzle below, it would light up. It would turn blue and then light up the actual letter. So it was a full-on working game, and it was a nightmare. It was so bad to eventually figure out kind of how to make that whole thing better, right? So I had a bunch of popular games in there, whether that was Jeopardy. But once I got to the Wheel of Fortune thing and making that whole thing work, updating and making puzzles was terrible, because I had to have like a shell of a program, right, where all of the squares lit up, right? And I also had to tell the animation pane when one thing was clicked to do this, to make the thing disappear, and to do that whole animation to reveal the letter, because the letter box was underneath it, and there was the other box layer on top of it, and it just sucked. And so, a resort, there's slower times of the year, and in one of those slower times, I said, you know what? We made it through the busy corporate season, which is September, through the beginning of November. And then you're kind of busy on the weekends and like the holidays and stuff, but that's not the corporate guests that are busy. So I had a little time, and I looked up, I said, how to make games. And there's, a whole bunch of people are like, oh, got to learn C#, C++, learn the Unity engine. But that wasn't the type of game that I needed to make. I needed to make something more like a way a PowerPoint works, but it's interactive, able to be clicked on, kind of more information based. And so I found my way to HTML and CSS. And so I said, you know what? Let's see what it's all about, right? So it's like everyone does, you get the hello world in the browser. You slowly start to learn HTML. And along with HTML, very quickly, you jump into CSS, because HTML looks like hell, right? You're like, nobody's gonna wanna look at that. So started making games in HTML and CSS. Now, they worked, and they worked a lot like a slide program, right? Like all of the HTML files were linked with hyperlinks to the other HTML files, which had, code in them, but really wasn't. Yes, it was better, and I could bring in video content and all stuff, and the files weren't huge, and they ran smoother, and all these different things, but it still wasn't right. And so I knew that I wanted to make it so people could interact with it, right? So it wasn't just the staff member was able to click on things because they knew where to click on things. It was, I wanted the guests to be able to click on things and move things around. And so you look it up, it says, hey, you want interactivity in the browser? You gotta learn JavaScript. So I said, okay. Taught myself HTML and CSS. By the way, I used a couple books. One of them is the Quick Start Guide, HTML, CSS. I'll link it in the video. So I said, hey, learn from a book. Let's do it with JavaScript. More challenging, for sure. Programmatically, when you start with JavaScript, you change your thinking. Like HTML and CSS makes a lot of sense because they're declarative. Meaning, like, you say, this box needs to be blue, right? You give it a class or an ID and tell the CSS what you want it to do. But JavaScript is different. There's concepts in it. Variables, so things get put into memory. Loops, so you can, loop over data, different data structures, whether that be arrays or objects, whatever. Functions, classes. There's a lot more involved in trying to figure out what's going on there. So I struggled a little bit. Tried the book, learned some stuff, learned how to make the game I wanted to make, but I didn't really have a big understanding of it, right? Like, a lot of it was borrowed code. This was before, it's funny to say, this was back in 2021. Yeah, 2021, I think. Like fall of, or the winter of 2021. And, so really didn't have like AI then. Crazy to think. So instead, a lot of it was like going on Stack Overflow, desperately trying to ask a question, getting shot down by the nerd moderator who was like, someone's already asked this question. It's like, dude, shut up. Just like, I can't find it. Let me ask the damn question. But that's not here for there. So you had Stack Overflow, and you had a lot of blogs. Like, you would find individual blog posts, people showing you how to do stuff. So that's kind of what I was doing from the book in there. And then eventually I got a Udemy course, which was Cold Steel. And it was pretty good. And right around that time is when I realized everything so far was front end knowledge. Nothing was back. There was no database. Anything I was making was hard coded, or the data in it was hard coded. So like, I had hardcore an array with all the questions and answers in it, right? But it wasn't in a database. And so I knew to get better, I had to explore database and learning the back end of the code. So at this point in time, I tried to jump into that. And that was my first introduction to PHP. Now, PHP made a lot of sense. Like, I realized that, you know, I could have things in the database. I could have, like I told you, we were making games, so I could have one screen, one browser window connected to the answers popping up for the person scoring the game, while everybody else is all looking at the questions, right? So that was cool. But when I turned to the internet, everybody was talking about how PHP is dead. Don't learn PHP, it's a dead language. PHP sucks, it's terrible. And as a rookie coder, I listened to them. And so I said, all right, I gotta learn how to do it the JavaScript way. So that's when you start jumping into Node, you start jumping into Express.js and all these libraries, which you're just not ready for when you're first learning. Like, you shouldn't go from being shaky with a loop to learning React. This doesn't make sense. But when you're young, or when you're first, I should say young in this, because this isn't just for young people, hence the point of the video, but when you're just getting started, you think you need to use all these things. And so I started to struggle a little bit. And during that time, I grew more unhappy at work in what I was doing, working at the resort. At the time I had 3 kids, and now I have 4, happy to say. At the time I had 3 kids, and I wasn't seeing them. When you work at a resort like I worked at, you're there. You're there from the time that people wake up in the morning, you know, to the time they go in bed, right? Like, a corporate group's there and they're doing some sort of game at 10 a.m. or a meeting at 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. And they're going straight through the day, and they're doing karaoke till 1 or 2 in the morning. You're there. And so I wasn't seeing my kids. I believe at the end of it, I was averaging 62 hours a week. So some weeks would be 60. Good weeks, I'd be at like 58. The bad weeks, I'd be at like 65 to 67. And it's just, I had little kids and I was missing them. And I remember my son calling me on the phone. He looks at me with his big baby eyes. At the time he was 3. And he says, "Daddy, are you coming home tonight?" And I had to tell him no. It broke my heart. And I had to tell him no. And that's when I realized, I'm like, I don't want this life anymore. It's not what I want to do. So the best thing for me was that I had already started down that path, right? It wasn't what I did all the time, but I had already started making strides to learning this new skill. And what I decided to do was fully invest in that skill, right? Anytime I could. Anytime a group was like, "Oh, we could do this," I would make a suggestion. "Oh, why don't we do this special game," right? And when they would agree to it, it'd be awesome, because that would mean, hey, I'm gonna learn more, right? And so I continued to hone that skill. By the end of the summer of 2022, summer 2022, that's when I was like, okay, I'm all in on this coding thing. I want to do this and I need to get out. So started to put out feelers for jobs and stuff. And even though I could code, and I was actually pretty good, I wasn't getting callbacks. I mean, why would I, right? Not a lot of experience with coding aside from the year that I have at a resort where I'm not even technically like a developer. I'm a corporate social director with 17 years of experience. You know, and so I felt like I needed something to be like, hey, like, I know what I'm doing. And that's when I signed up for a JavaScript boot camp. I get into boot camps all on my own, but I don't think I really want to do that in this video. That's kind of its own thing for another day. But I basically took the boot camp, and it was a 9-month boot camp, so it was longer. So there was a bunch of different choices from different universities and different spots you could take them. But the one I ended up taking was MIT's boot camp, full stack web development, which they taught us the MERN stack basically. And so when that started, I was in the boot camp scheduled to graduate around July of the following year. So it was from like September or October until, you know, July or August the next year. So signed up and I started, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to slowly chip away, get myself to where I want to be, which I was already doing, but this is just, you know, kind of accelerating it. Boot camp, say what you will about them. It went on the resume. And January of 2023, I took an interview for a job as a developer working with VBA, which is Visual Basic for Applications. So that's like, you know, Microsoft Access, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, being able to write programs within those programs, macros, connected to databases, that sort of thing. But, so it wasn't what I love to do. It wasn't even really what I like to do. But it got me in the right industry, and it was literally 20 minutes from my house. And I live in a rural, I mean, look around, I live in a rural part of the world. So that was like a rare find. I said, okay, I'm taking this job. And the best part about it was within a few months, we got a web project right away, and it was working with PHP. So that's really where my deep dive into PHP began. So I was learning PHP, I was learning JavaScript on the back end, React, all these different technologies. And I was also learning VBA. So it was a lot, right? And mind you, at this time, I'm 35 now, 35 years old. Yeah, 2023, 35 years old. And, you know, this is when people are like, oh, I'm too young, I'm too old to learn this stuff. You know, that's for the young people to do. No, I was learning 3 coding languages, learning SQL as well, because we were working with Microsoft SQL Server for a lot of our stuff. I was even learning some C# and .NET. So it's not like it was easy, right? And so what ended up happening was, made it through, I learned a lot, I graduated from the boot camp. And then in September of the following year, my boss said to me, he's like, yeah, you know, things are getting kind of slow. Let's try to make an agency. So we'll take all your web knowledge, we'll spin off an agency that's owned by our company. And, you know, we'll start doing websites. I was like, great, that's awesome. Now, we didn't really get a lot of websites because it seemed like we were doubling down on that, and the website thing was just like a if you have time sort of thing. So never really went far, but you know, I entertained a bunch of calls. We came very, very close a couple times to selling some big websites, but didn't really happen. And then by May of the next year, I had grown to where I was like, we had a big project coming on where there was a ton of, there was like a big access program that we were just getting, and like it was at the very beginning of it, and you know, my boss was like, oh, I'm gonna like make this your baby sort of thing, and I was like, I don't really want this baby, you know. And so respectfully, I kind of got an offer for another job, and I respectfully said, hey, this is a good time, you know, so you're just getting this other thing. I really like you. Like, it was hard because he's a great guy, gave me everything that I needed. It just was, the work wasn't what I wanted to do. So I got an offer as a junior level PHP developer, and I took it. And it was an hour and a half from my house, so it was far. And so I had to go 4 days a week in office, 1 day at home, which when I took the job, the eventual understanding was, you know, I'd be in office maybe 2 or 3 days a week, but we wanted 4 days a week to start off, which made sense. So all throughout June, all throughout July, all throughout August, 4 days a week, hour and a half there, hour and a half back, learning the code base, you know, kind of just diving into the whole thing. And then eventually got to the end of the summer, and they were like, yeah, at this point I think you're good, we can just do 1 day a week in office. I was like, what? Now by this point I had already blown out the transmission on my car from all the miles. I had to get a new one, and that's not here nor there. But now I go in 1 day a week, and I'm working in PHP and JavaScript, working with APIs, doing all the stuff that I want to do, you know. And here we are a year later after that, and man, my skills have progressed so far. I'm so much better than I ever thought I even would be. Like, you know, I can look at a piece of code and tell you what's wrong. It's crazy. You know, I learned how to debug, like all these different things I got so good at. And in that time as well, I started my own business. And so I taught myself WordPress, you know, and I have a bunch of clients there and a bunch of websites there. So when I'm not doing my 9 to 5, I am all over my own business, you know, which brings in supplemental income, which is great. All this. Oh, and I went from 65, or what did I say, 63 probably average hours, to now 35. Because it's a 40-hour work week where you're required to punch out for lunch 5 days a week. So, and then on top of it, if I work over 40, I get paid overtime on top of my salary. That was like, that never happened at the resort. Like, you know, those hours over 40 hours, that wasn't overtime. That was regular. Like, what you made the same if you worked 20 hours as if you worked 63. So, you know, my life has gotten so much better. It was so much different when my most recent child was born, because I was there for everything. I was there for the appointments. I've been there to see him grow, see him roll over for the first time, to start crawling, like see his first time eating food, you know, like all that stuff was through, you know, a text message from my wife. I saw it with my own eyes this time. And it's so worth making the change out there. And so if you're one of those people out there and you're like, I don't want to do X anymore, I want to be a programmer. First things that you need to decide is, number one, do you love programming? So all the benefits that I just mentioned, the hours, the pay, you know, those things, that point is moot. That point is moot if you don't like programming, because you're in for a real rude awakening if you become a programmer and you don't like to program. Because you could spend 2 or 3 hours on a bug and make absolutely no progress with anything. You know? So you need to have that ability to focus in and really want to, like, not being able, you know, almost like ADHD hyper focus that you cannot let go. Like, this thing is bothering you and you need to fix it. So that's a huge attribute that you need to. You have to do that. You have to like to learn. All right. So you need to be able to, you need to like programming. You need to like learning. All right. Because newsflash, you're never going to have a stale technology, okay? Technologies will be replaced by other technologies. Things will change as you go. Even if you work in WordPress, which has been around for a very long time, and in the whole grand scheme of, libraries or frameworks, whatever you want to call it, it still makes updates and they still change things. They take functions away, they add new functions. Like, same thing goes for, like, if you're working with databases, they update them, and MySQL is one of them, right? So I think now you can't have null as a default value, or you need to set null to a default value or whatever it is. I can't remember which, but like, that's a change, and that can break a bunch of stuff in whatever you made. And so once that change happens, if you were to upgrade that, now you need to go back and fix all that stuff, right? You need to always like learning, because I guarantee you something's going to come along where you're going to have to learn, right? So your company needs to connect with another company, right? Through an API. So you need to learn how to use their API. What's it written in, right? You need to be able to convert whatever your language is into their language, right? Like, you need to be able to know how to do this stuff and learn this stuff. So again, you need to like programming. You need to like to learn. Those are like the biggest things I could think about. But if those two things sound like you like to be challenged and you like to figure out puzzles, this is a great career for you, okay? So once you decide that you really want to program and you really want to do this for your career, then step 2 is you got to build projects, okay? Yes, reading books is good, okay? Knowledge base is good, but it's not gonna solidify, right? I compare it to putting a patio onto the back of your house, right? Adding like a patio, a tile patio or something like that. You watch YouTube videos, you can watch them dig it out. They get the sand, right? They put the grout in between the tiles, right? You like look at it, like, oh yeah. You watch a bunch of those videos and feel like you know what you're doing. Then you get in the backhoe. You're like, what the hell am I doing? Same thing goes for coding. It's a skill that needs to be honed. So you start to learn and learn slow. You're gonna want to go fast, but I would say from no code to a mid-level developer in 3 years, that's fast. But I didn't try to make myself go fast, right? So you go and you build projects. Doesn't matter how shitty the project is, you build it, okay? Go out and build the to-do list that everybody's done a million times before. Learn CRUD. Learn how to first do HTML and CSS, then learn either JavaScript or PHP. I mean, you could learn either or both at the same time, but I would say the more useful to make you a better programmer is to learn PHP first. To make you feel like you're making strides, learn JavaScript first. So kind of up to you, but PHP is more similar probably to what you're gonna be doing with other languages as well. So start doing that. Then decide what kind of developer do you want to be, right? Maybe you should do that even before you start building projects. Decide what developer you want to be. Do you want to be a web developer? Do you want to develop games, right? Do you want to do AI? Figure that out now, because whatever that answer is going to guide you on your choice of language and where you should start. And that's really, I don't think any language is going to be bad to learn, but that's just to get you on the right track, right? Just to kind of progress you in the direction you want to go. Also, when choosing, look at your area. If you don't want to move, you're in an area where all your friends and family are, and you can't imagine leaving that area. Well, you better look at jobs in the area and what people are hiring in your area, right? So like up by me, the only programming jobs I think I ever see are .NET jobs. And the VBA job that I luckily got, right? So that should tell you as well what you should be learning if you want to stay in your area. Then you build the project, you build a portfolio. I also could recommend you as well, reach out. At one point I ran a promotion on building people websites. I said, for $500, I'll build your WordPress website. And this was a custom theme. This was custom plugins, the whole shebang, right? Totally customized. And the reason I did that was because I wanted my business to get some teeth. right? And get some momentum. And it did. Like, sure, I still market and stuff, but like most of the time, it's somebody that I know or somebody that reaches out to me because they know somebody that I know. So I don't really have to like make cold calls or anything like that. People just kind of come to me. But get like actual professional projects done, because if you put on your resume and you say, I did the website for this school or for this company or whatever it is, right? And it's actually a full-on working thing, somebody that looks at that is going to take you a lot more seriously than if you have a Netflix clone, right? Something that just kind of pulls from a database and shows a bunch of different videos and then picks like different categories and whatever. That's not as impressive to somebody as somebody that actually sees a real business. And it's because they know from front end to back end, all that needs to be working correctly and that somebody's doing business with that thing, right? So get out there, build projects, try to do things for cheap. I would never do them for free, do them for cheap. Get your name out there, get a nice portfolio, and then start applying. Apply and apply for realistic jobs for you, okay? So like, if somebody says mid-level developer and you've never worked as a junior, you're not getting that job. Don't apply for it. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of their time, especially if you get an interview. It's even a bigger waste. Also, don't lie on your resume. Be honest with what you know. Because if you go to a job and you say, hey, yeah, I know Laravel, and then everything's built in Laravel, they're going to know. They're going to know, especially if they do like a coding, like a challenge for you, a whiteboard challenge, something like that. You're screwed and you're going to look really bad. So be honest and don't get discouraged. Put out all those resumes, take the calls, learn from each one. If you don't get hired, figure out what you did wrong, right? Say, I probably could have answered this better. Or if there was a gap in something in your knowledge, go learn that thing, okay? Because all this stuff is just going to make you a better version of yourself, a better programmer, and lead you to your first job. When you get that first job, it might not be the first job you want, right? It might not be the perfect thing. It wasn't for me. But I stayed there for a whole year. And actually it was like 14 or 15 months. Stayed there that whole time. Learned as much as I could. When there was something I didn't like to do, I'd say, you know what? I don't love it, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn it, and it's under my belt. And all that stuff has contributed to where I am now. Okay? So get a job for 1 year at least, and then look for the next job. The next job that kind of butters your bread a little bit more, and you'll find it. And eventually you'll interview, you'll find the job, and it'll put you right on the path you want to be on, like I am now. So I guess to wrap this all up with a bow, it's never too late. Again, 34 years old, never wrote a line of code. I'm 37 years old today, okay? I'm a mid-level PHP JavaScript developer. I own my own company, right? I don't want to say how much money I make yearly at it, but I do fairly well on my side business. I work for somebody else 35 hours a week. I work for myself the rest of the time. I see my wife more. I see my kids more. I mean, everything is better. Everything is better. It was hard, right? It was very hard. I still remember doing the boot camp, trying to get the boot camp stuff done and being exhausted. I was working my 60, like I said, I was working 60 some and doing the boot camp for a good 5 months maybe. And before I got that other job, and man, it was exhausting. I would get home from a 14-hour shift and have to go and write code, tired. Not easy, guys. It's not going to be easy. And when you get the job, it's not easy, okay? You're going to have to continue to learn and push yourself. And there's always going to be that thing that you try to do and it doesn't work. And so you have to try at it a zillion times, but eventually you're going to get it. And you can do it. So if I can share something, I hope somebody out there watches this that's feeling like that. They're like, I'm in a dead-end job. I should go and I should do something else. And, but then they look at, and that's, I guess the last thing I should say is AI. Like, AI is not replacing programmers anytime soon. So you still have a lot of time. It's going to be harder as a junior developer, because I think a lot of those, basically the market's correcting itself, and then AI is kind of in there right now, but I don't see it replacing juniors, especially because you need mid-level and senior developers, and the only way that you get them to mid and senior level is they got to start as juniors. So stick with it, give it your all, you'll get there. I did, right? Living proof right here. So you can do it too. There's nothing special about me. I'm not smarter than anybody else. I'm not better than anybody else. I don't know more, but I do know that I have drive, and I was driven to do this. I still have that drive, right? For my business, for my family, to get better. And if you have that same drive, you'll be fine. Just keep after it. Doesn't matter how old you are, 34, 24, 54, you can do it. So again, that's my message here, and the wisdom I've learned on my 37 trips around the sun. Keep coding out there, keep pushing yourself, and you'll get to where you want to be. Again, this is Eric Coates. Thanks for hanging with me.